Hello, class. So today we're going over research and joining the scholarly conversation. Let's get right into it. So, what is research? Well, before we get right into it, actually, you guys should have already been working on project two. You are doing your peer reviews or just about doing those. And one of the things I want to do before you guys get any further into into your research paper is understanding what research is, right? And so it's going to cover some of the stuff that you've already done already to start your research paper and some of the stuff that you're going to do, especially this next week when you get into project three, which is actually writing your research paper. But this is a good overall view of what research is about and how you go about, making a research paper, especially writing one in any kind of situation, right? So if you follow kind of what I have laid out here, you should be fine no matter what class asks you to do, for what kind of research. If it asks you for a research paper, this is what you're kind of going to do. But anyways, so what is research? Some definitions here from the Oxford Concise Dictionary are the systematic investigation into the study of materials, sources, etc., in order to establish facts and reach new conclusions, and an endeavor to discover new or collect old facts, etc., by the scientific study of a subject or by the course of critical investigation. The idea being, and you're probably going to be doing A instead of B, right? We're not actually going to conduct our own research, as I've mentioned several times. But the idea being that you are gathering materials, in this case, your articles and your maybe videos and whatever else, to come up with a new conclusion. In our case, an argument, right, about whatever topic that it is that you're researching. So think of research as what we have to do to kind of resolve a question, or if we have a question and what we think of the ways to resolve it, right? We may have an answer to that question already because all of us have preconceived notions, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we are correct without actually doing the research, right? We may even think that that question is obvious. So it's like, why should we stop pollute? Should we stop using plastic bottles, right? And I always use this example. I'm sorry, but it's it's just so easy, right? And it's a very good example. But so if that was my research question is like, hey, should we still use plastic bottles? And the question, and I would think, well, yeah, we should just completely stop it. It's just something we should not do anymore. But it's not so easy, right? Because if you think of the opposite side, you're like, well, there's a reason we've used plastic bottles because they're so cheap, they're so effective, they do keep whatever it is that they're holding clean from outside, sources. And so we know when we get something in a plastic bottle that what's inside the container it should be fine as long as it wasn't tampered with, right? So even though we think, oh, it's obvious to just get rid of it, there's also other things that we have to consider. That's why we have to do research. Again, and that you guys have already been doing this, right? Before we come up with our conclusion, you have to be able to figure out what the conversation is happening, what is going on. And that's really what research is all about, that conversation and how you can add to that conversation. So first priority before to do the research is, of course, formulate your question. You guys have already done this. This is the first thing you had to do before you even look for sources. And then the next thing after that is, of course, figure out a way to answer that question. In our case, I said, go look for articles, go look for things that might help you understand your topic better. Then once that's done, you just present whatever answer you come up with. And it's not a simple answer. I'm like, yep, we should get rid of plastic bottles. It's quite maybe that's your thesis, but you'll have to have a lot bigger, understand like explanation of what do you mean? What does that go through? So in short, though, a research paper is a written piece of work in your own words, and that's going to be very important, especially with AI, which we'll talk about later in this presentation, that fully discusses a topic that you have spent a time learning about. It is to be adept and intelligent with support from credible sources. This paper will be your work, but you have based your knowledge of the credible work of others, meaning you're building your ethos, your argument off of the work that has already been built. This is how research works. You add on to that conversation. So even though I may think, so after doing my research in my example of plastic bottles, I found all these various sources, and this is what's come up so far. I'm going to add to the point. Yes, we can't get rid of all the plastic bottles. I understand that. But perhaps based on how the damage they've been doing to our environment, we can get rid of plastic bottles that are single use. And instead of using those kind of plastic bottles, we use reusable plastics or plastics that or material that decomposes a lot better or whatever. Maybe I don't know I forget if there's bamboo that does that. I don't know, whatever. But you get the point. That's the idea. That's what research is all about. So, questions for analyzing your rhetorical situation as a researcher. The first one, what are you trying to accomplish in your research project? What is the thing that you're being asked to do? That is something that you have to keep in mind. Two, what expectations beside your own do you need to consider? So you have your own expectations, right? What are other things that are something that you have to look at as well? What are all the areas? How much freedom do you have to make choices in this rhetorical situation? The idea being like, are you asked to research about a topic specifically, or like my paper, you can pick whatever you want. Maybe you can pick whatever topic, right? But in other classes, say it's a history class, right? And they're asking you to write a research paper about World War II and about a certain battle. Well, that's chosen for you, right? You have to look at it in those lens. Uh, could you benefit from looking at examples of this kind of writing? Basically, find examples. So if you're not sure how a research paper works in a history class or a scientific class, find examples, look for them, Google them, right? Um, it may be, and this is just to find an example, worth the endeavor to kind of ask an AI to say, hey, what would a history paper look like? Of course, we'll talk about this later in this presentation. Don't copy and paste it over, but that's a great use of AI is to give you examples. And then lastly, what image of yourself do you want to present in your final project? Basically, what is it that you're bringing to your research that is solely yours? What is the argument, the conclusion that you come up with based on what you've researched so far? A good researcher enjoys learning new things. Now, of course, I can't make you feel this stuff, but it's something to keep in mind when you are researching. But basically, it's one of the reasons why I've given you the option of picking whatever topic you want. I want you to pick something that you enjoy, that you like, that you want to learn more about, because nothing is worse than researching something you could not care less. And that may happen in other classes, but in my class, I'm hoping that you pick something that you really are passionate about and that you hopefully enjoy learning, because that really helps with researching. Consider multiple perspectives with an open mind. That's a key thing when it comes to research and honestly all aspects of life. But for this aspect, think of it. You have your own perspective on things, and that's of course important. However, that isn't the only perspective that is valid. Look at it through multiple lens. Look at it with an open mind. You may have an idea. Even my example where I say, "Hey, I think plastic bottles, especially single-use plastic bottles, should be removed." However, understanding that, I also can get that we might need them in certain situations or in certain areas, right? Use as many type of sources as possible. Of course, I've asked you to find journal articles, the most of those, but finding different types of sources is a good way to kind of support whatever point you have to make and know how to handle uncertainty. There's going to be some things that when it comes to your topic, you might not have the full answer for, and that is fine. You might end up being in the sense that your ultimate conclusion is, you know what, this is a very important topic, but ultimately more research needs to be done, and that's fine. You're not solving world hunger here. You're continuing the conversation of whatever research topic you have brought about. So choosing a topic. You already done this, but I just want to go over some of the steps of what you would do for research in general. Just so you, like I said, once you have these kind of steps down, doesn't matter what class you're in or whatever you're doing, you should be able to do a research paper pretty easily. And this is something that the more you do, the easier it'll become. And it's especially important if you go over to a university and you take a different class, and you'll have different things to do in those places. But no matter what, follow this and you'll be fine. So choose a topic. But of course, like I said, if you're given the situation where you can choose a topic, great. If not, well, then you have a topic chosen for you. You need to go on to the next slide. But anyways, so first choose a subject that interests you. Hopefully you've chosen something for this project three, or well, project two that'll help you for project three, but basically chosen a topic that you're interested in. Then choose a subject for which wide range of source material is readily available. You need to be able to find sources on a lot of sources about your topic, right? That's if there's not a lot of sources about your topic, just say it, because it's like, say it's like very new. So say like it was 2021, right? And you really want to do AI, the kind of AI that we know. There probably wasn't a lot of sources then, but if you do it now, oh my God, there's so many now, right? But back then it would have been really hard to do. So you might have had to wait a little long, right? Not so much anymore. And then three, probably really important, make sure you choose a subject of significance, a subject of lasting interest that will challenge and be gratifying. Do not choose a topic that is insignificant or it doesn't really matter. Don't ever choose something like which soda is better, Coke or Pepsi? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? It's subjective, right? But maybe like, well, what is the best type of renewable energy source that the state of Washington should use? That is a really good question. That is a really good, worthy pursuit, but not along the lines like, what is the best shoe out there for, well, actually, that might not be a bad idea, actually, now that I'm thinking about. But you know what I mean. Anything that's like just not very significant or worth this kind of research. Choose a topic of significance. Uh, Next, always make sure your topic is as narrow as possible. After you've chosen whatever topic you have, you must narrow it down so it becomes very specific and it's easier to research, right? And this should all be reviewed, but I just want to make sure this is something that you all have in mind, right? So, for instance, we have here on the left insects to butterflies to the monarch butterflies. You choose specifically because insects is so wide. Here we have, right, World War II, debate in diplomacy and history, war in the Pacific, surrender of Japan, getting very narrow. And I kind of had a similar example before, right, where I said I want to think about renewable energy, and I like solar and wind, but honestly, you're like, well, that's too broad. I should probably say, well, you know what? Maybe in the state of Washington, we should just focus on solar energy, and that's it, because we don't have to worry about all these other aspects. And maybe that's the focus you're going to go on, which is perfectly fine. Either way, narrow your topic. And I know this is something that should be reviewed. Things to consider when narrowing a topic, though, do some general reading on your topic so that you become familiar with the various aspects of it. Like I said, just Google it, Google your topic, see what you find, see if it's something that you can really make it very precise. Establish the purpose of your paper. What will you be informing the reader about? Be sure your topic can be handled with an assignment, the assignment length. This is important because if your question or your research is just too broad, there's no way you can write it down or get it done in 10 pages. Imagine if you said something along the lines of computers are bad for kids. Okay. Well, parts of a computer. Oh my, there's so much of a computer, right? There's no way. You gotta make it very specific, or like games on a computer, maybe, or the internet, whatever, right? Focus on a particular aspect of your topic that will lend itself to the sources available. So once you've done your journal, of course, reading, the source that should determine where your topic should be heading. And again, this should all be review, honestly. This is something that you should already narrow down by this point of the class. But here's some examples of narrowing a topic. For instance, we have a general topic here of eating disorders, and then the broader topic of anorexia nervosa. A specific topic, though, from all this is physical effects of anorexia nervosa. So that's a very specific thing that someone would search. And then here's some subtopics that are supporting this point here. And this sounds like it'd be just a general research paper in the sense that it would just be a report about this condition, right? But that just gives you an example of what I'm talking about narrowing. Okay, after all that, look for a variety of sources. And again, this is something that you guys should all be done with, but it's good to just review here real quick. Books, periodicals, especially journal articles, very important. Blogs, if they're, credible, government documents, websites. Those are all a variety, good variety of sources. You, of course, should know by now that you had 5 sources of journal articles, but the rest could be something else. They could all be journal articles, but by all means, a variety of sources is a good way to kind of see things in different perspectives. Don't cite Wikipedia or other wikis. This is kind of a little tricky one. And a good rule of thumb is to not cite them because they can be edited by anybody. But honestly, they have become pretty credible, but it's kind of hard to cite them without an author. And that's the problem when it comes to research papers, that they don't have authors, and as such, you can't attribute it to one person to defend, say, something from Wikipedia. But having said that, Wikipedia is a great resource to start any research paper. It's a great way to just inform yourself about your topic. You don't need to be an expert about your topic to really research it. That's what you're doing, right? You're becoming an expert by researching. So you should be able to research anything that you'd want to research. And Wikipedia is a great resource for that. And maybe it'll lead you towards more credible sources. So yeah, maybe you don't want to cite it in your paper, but there might be instances where maybe you cite general information and you cite Wikipedia, that's fine, but you don't want to use it throughout a paper, right? Or weave it or use it as support to your argument. But that's not to say not to use it. It's a great place to start for any research. Um, let's see, there we go. When I start researching, how do I know a site is credible? This is important. This is getting to, and this is something, of course, that you should have worked on in your second assignment but this is a good thing to keep in mind because one of the things that you're looking for is how are you setting up the credibility of your sources? And how can you find, before you can do that, well, you need to figure out, well, what is the credibility of the sources, right? So one, know the name of the author of the site and their credentials. Are they a doctor, researcher, journalist, etc.? This is going to be really easy for your journal articles. For your other sources, you might have to do a little bit more work, right? Know what company or organization the site is affiliated with. What is this company? Do they have a bias? Are they someone who has a stake in whatever topic you're looking into? Know where the site exists. Is it a social media site or a blog? If it's a social media site or a blogger page, it's not going to be very credible, right? You don't want to use social media unless it's like an example, right? A very specific example that maybe the social media, you have like a tweet or something like that, and you want to use an example about someone saying something about policies. That's one thing, but not to use it as support, right? But knowing where the site exists, like what is the site from, like what are their credentials, that's important because you want to mention that in your paper to set up the credibility of your source. Remember, your ethos is only as strong as your source. Know what type of information is being conveyed. So is this information about just informing you about the topic, or is there like data sets about the topic? So maybe you find um, some information from a government website like the WHO or the FDA, right, that you want to use over someone's interpretation of that. There must be useful information you can gather for your study. Of course, the information that you find has to be useful that supports your argument. It just shouldn't just be random information that you put into the paper just because you needed something to cite. That's something to work on. And know when the site was updated last. If your site is outdated, or like it hasn't been updated in years, it's probably not going to be a good source to use, right? If the last time it was updated was like 5 years ago, it's not going to be good. If it's been constantly updated, or the site, at least the general site in which the article lives in, is constantly being used still and it's still like up to date, then you should be good to go. Here's some examples of good versus bad websites. Here we have a page from uh, a site on the left, and then here we have like just random comments, basically, right? And these are both about vampires and just show something that was fun, I guess. And then here's just says following the strange trails of the vampire through the history leads down any number of false dark alleys and real dark corridors wherever they're regarded stalker or carrion rogue. The vampire sees to permeate every society in a world in one form or another. Yet there do these creatures originate from? When do they differ in appearance and behavior from country to country? And above all, why are they such murderous creatures, so terrifying yet so attractive to us at the same time? To explore the true birthplace of the vampire, we must look at two of the greatest empires in the world, and the Greeks and Egyptians, and so on and so forth. It's a credible source. It's from a doctor, and she's looking at how vampires came about in different civilizations, and why are they so engaging to us as humans, right? And over here on the right, we have vampires are undoubtedly the coolest creatures out there in the comparison to werewolves or ghosts. Neither is more real or more powerful than the vampire. I myself am a vampire, and so it is with pride I tell you about myself to scare you a little more. People taste better when they're scared. So yeah, here's just some random comments. Like all vampires originate from LA. Some people think vampires are from other places, but the true vampires are seen in LA. I swear this is great. Not so credible, right? Not the best. And here's a good definition of like why each of these are credible compared to the other ones, right? So the good site is clearly you could see who wrote the article, why they were a credible source, and information that would help you with your research. Furthermore, the web address, which is Huntington Mifflin, is a school textbook company, is a trustworthy source. You have an author here. You could probably see, where they came from, where they're studying from. Over here on the bad side, on the right, the it's quite the opposite. It's based on opinion. There's no credible author or company to back them up, and the address isn't probably going to be very good, the web address in that regard. And it's anytime it's from a personal blog, it's probably not going to be a credible source. You can find anything on the internet that's going to agree with what you perceive or what the perspective doesn't make it a credible source. It's your job in your paper, especially in your research paper, now that you have your sources, is to, okay, These are my sources. How am I going to present them in my paper and set up their credibility? If you can't, you might just want to remove that source and find something else because you definitely don't want to be like the people on the right here. A framework for understanding sources, a couple things to just help you further along with this. Who wrote or created it? Who published or distributed it? What kind of quality control did it have to go through to get published? What kind of evidence does the author use? When was it written? And how does my rhetorical situation affect these five first questions? Again, your journal articles, it's going to be pretty easy to set up. You know who created it and where they're coming from, and then what the credentials are, right? You're going to know that they're researchers and doctors and people in that specific field. Who published or distributed it? It's going to be a journal article. That's all you have to say. The journal of whatever science or whatever, maybe from JSTOR, it doesn't matter. It's going to have a ton of stuff there that you don't really have to worry too much. But if it is, like I said, another source from a website, how do you know the website is credible and doesn't have a bias, right? What kind of quality control did it have? Well, a journal article, it's peer reviewed. It had to go through this peer process to be able to go further along, right? So because of that, it it's highly credible. It had to go through a ton of quality control before it could actually be published. Not so much in articles, right? But maybe if it's from a news article, it did have to go through some editorial and some other people to look at it to see if this is something worth publishing in their site, right? But if it's a blog post, not so much, right? Anybody could just post it, so that's where it's a problem. What kind of evidence does the author use? Where does he cite sources? How do they cite sources, right? What do they use to support their arguments and their claims? You'll notice journal articles again, very credible because they cite other journal articles a ton, right? When was it written? Again, this has to do with the date. If it's newer, better. If it's really old, not so much. Depends, of course, on your topic. If you're talking about television, something from the 1980s might work, although something newer might be better. If you're talking about books, something even older from like 1950s might be fine. But if you're talking about like digital privacy, something from 2015 is probably outdated compared to you want something from like 2020 and earlier. And how does your rhetorical situation affect the first five questions? How does this here set up your credibility, right? How did this set up your ethos in their paper that you know that you're using this here, these sources to set up your statement or whatever topic that you're going to be discussing as something worth listening to, right? If remember, you're only as strong as the ethos that your sources have. All right, so who wrote or created it? Um, is the author a scholar? Is the author affiliated with a research institution or university? Is it a reporter, covers a topic, or a regular beat? Is the author a spokesperson or an interest group for a company with financial interest? Remember, set up the author's credibility. You only have to do this once in the paper. Do that once and you'll be good to go. Who published or distributed it? Is it a scholarly society, a commercial entity, a local regional newspaper, government agency, a research self-publishing individual? Anything like that, right? Set up their that idea like that it was published by this article, it was published by this website because you want to mention where it came from. What kind of quality control did it go through? Again, peer-reviewed source. That's all you have to say. It was peer-reviewed when it comes to journal articles. But other stuff, was it copied, fact-checked, reviewed? Was it self-published on a website? When a company like Amazon, Barnes Noble, does the source represent the author's views? Is it their own source? So if you use a video of that word they made, did they mention in the video that how they researched their points, right? Or are they just coming up and just taking all the stuff out of their butt, which wouldn't be the best, right? Has the source won any awards or prizes? If it has, you may want to mention it in your paper. What kind of evidence does the author use? Again, does it explain the context of the work while citing other sources? This is going to be a case when it comes to journal articles, but what about an article online, right? Does the author conduct original research or are they synthesizing research conducted by others? And this is what you're doing, of course. You're going to synthesize research conducted by others, but your primary sources that you're using probably conducted their own research, especially the journal articles. Make sure to mention that in the paper. If they didn't, what did they do? How did they get that source? What kind of sources are used to support claims? Does this author provide links or list of citations? Is the sources are uncited? Are they named or unnamed? All that's going to be important. When was it written? Again, date's going to matter. If it's depending, of course, on your topic. Does the source present the most up-to-date research? Is the source a classic referred to regularly? Like a lot of people use this source always to talk about their topic. Or is it something that is rather newer? Does the source provide information about a historical event from a period in which the event occurred? Time is going to matter when it comes to research here. And how does your rhetorical situation affect the answers here? Like I said, have you discovered anything that would make your reader question the quality of your sources? And of course, like I said, how are you setting up your ethos based on the quality of your sources? Have you discovered anything that you think your reader needs to know to appreciate your source fully? Okay, but once you start researching your topic, here's the thing, of course, that you have to do. Once you've of course looked at your research here and oops, sorry, I'm going it the wrong way. Once you've looked at the basically the ethos of your sources, making sure they're credible sources, here's what you need to do to then start finding the information you're going to need to use those sources in your own work. So, first thing is you have to get familiar with your sources. You have to read them, which you should be doing now if you haven't already, especially for your proposal and your annotated bibliography, but you have to highlight the information that you're going to think is going to be useful for your paper, and then decide that what information is going to be used from that paper to your paper. After this is, of course, after you've gotten all of your sources. Um, all right. So, anyways, all this to say that this is all of the stuff that you should have done or currently doing right now, right? Especially since you've already turned in your proposal and entered a bit. However, it doesn't mean it's over. You can still find more sources, especially if you find that some of your sources are not very credible, and then find things that might help you further. Maybe you want to remove a source, add another source, or just add more sources in general, right? These are things that you want to do. And this is just something to keep in mind that you will do for all of your research papers from now on. All right, so you got all the research part out, right? You finally finished, you find your sources, you looked at them, you found how they're credible, and you're all ready to go. Okay, so now it's time to start writing your paper. So, introduction, right? Just like you had before, you have an introduction. I always have a hook, something to grab the attention of your reader to say, like, hey, something along the lines like, right now, everybody on the planet Earth is has microplastics in the body. We don't know the effects or what kind of things that's going to cause us, but that is an issue that we all have. It's even if we ourselves don't come into contact directly with plastic, our food does. Do you see what I'm doing? That's a good grab about like, oh, this is why you want to be care about my topic. Then briefly discuss your topic, whatever it may be. And so after maybe that grab that I had about, the food and being plastic, maybe I want to say, this is why plastic bottles, especially single-use plastic bottles, are something that needs to be addressed as pollution in the oceans due to these bottles is becoming a big issue. And as such, and this is where I go to my thesis, we need to stop using single-use plastic because and then I give my reasons, whatever the reasons are, right? But that's the introduction. That's what you're going for. You're hooking the reader, you're giving them the idea of what it is that you're talking about, and then you're giving them your argument. Of course, then you'll have your body paragraphs. The body paragraphs are all about um, having your topic, whatever. So if one of my reasons of why we need to get rid of plastic bottles is they're polluting the oceans, it's probably going to be one of my big topics. And maybe another reason I'm going to say is like they're getting into our food, especially seafood. A lot of fishes, like salmon, has a certain amount of plastics now, no matter what. That might be subjective topic too, and then so on and so forth. Maybe you only have 2 points. That's fine, but those 2 points might be so big and so important that they take like 4 pages each or something, right? Totally fine. Or maybe you have 3 points. However many points you have to support whatever your argument. But that's the idea. That's your subtopic. Think of subtopic more like as point one that supports my point two that supports my argument, point three that supports my argument. Basically, your argument being your thesis. In your conclusion, right? Rephrase your thesis statement. Make sure you just restate it. Briefly discuss the main points that you had here. This is briefly. You go into much in depth. That's what each of these body paragraphs is about. And then think big picture. Maybe you'll say maybe the big picture is like, you know what? Maybe this is why we need alternatives to plastic bottles, or it could be that more research needs to be done. That's fine. Just do this is where you can kind of have a conjecture here, like, oh, maybe based on what I found, maybe this is what we should do, but more research needs to be done. Totally fine. And that's like a really quick nitty-gritty on what you would do for a research paper, right? Or introduction, body paragraphs, conclusion. But let's do a further kind of outline as to how a research paper would go, right? I think there's 8 steps total in general. There might be more, but I find that 8 steps is what we do. So here we have, of course, choose a topic. You already did this. Choose a topic that you could research. I already went through a lot of this at the beginning of the point, but you get the idea. Gather information, Google it, find sources. Um, oh, this is incorrect here. Oops. We don't need to have this one. Let me delete this. You don't need to have 8 sources. Let's go back to, I don't want to confuse anybody with this. There we go. I think you have 10. It depends. Look at your assignment. I don't know how much you actually have, but this is just for example. Begin gathering sources in your library and on your own. You know this. Read, highlight sources, as I mentioned before. Be aware of your audience. Do not highlight everything is a good thing, though. You can't highlight everything because one of the things you have to do is decide which information needs to go in your paper and what you can leave out because it's just none of this is necessarily relevant. It's just not something that you need specifically to include. Develop a thesis statement. This is so you guys should already be done with the first 3 steps, honestly, right? For the most part, this is where you're working on, right? Developing a thesis statement, developing an argument. Once you especially finish your second paper and you submitted it to me as a mini portfolio, the next thing you're going to do is, okay, I found these sources. I wrote my proposal. I wrote, I know what's going on with my topic. So, what is the argument I'm going to be making about my topic? What is it that I'm going to argue for this 10-page paper? That is what you're going to develop, right? Step 5, highly recommend an outline. Outline is going to be super important. Don't worry, we're going to be making an outline next week or whatever week, whenever we start our research paper. I don't know if it's next week for this class, but whenever we start our research paper proper, it will be an outline is one thing. It's going to be so helpful to make an outline because it gives you a kind of a plan of attack for kind of dealing with such a large paper. And it makes it a lot easier to just kind of digest this paper because it is large. But if you follow these steps and been following along, it shouldn't be so heavy because you have all these sources to use. You need to kind of plan what source is going to go where. Plus, again, use your sources multiple times throughout your paper. It's going to help you write a 10-page paper and beyond, no problem. It's kind of something you want to learn. But again, outline, it's going to help you do this. Cite correctly. It's very important that you cite, especially when it comes to a research paper. They are highly credible. They're supposed to be. If your citations are incorrect, it hurts your credibility. Of course, don't worry if you made a mistake in your revised or your rough drafts. That's what you're practicing. But especially when it comes to your final draft, you want to make sure your citation is as correct as possible. Step 7, use a different types of methods of citing your sources. Don't just always quote a source, and you really should not really quote it. One thing I will say, do not quote like a huge paragraph in your paper, okay? But use different lead-ins. Like we have here, according to Smith 54, the presence of television set in the home even changed eating habits, frozen TV dinners, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So here they set up the source that we're going to use, the page number, and then they go on with it, right? Here we have a quote by the early 1960s, 90% of all households had at least one television set, Bishop and Marx 2. And so here they have and I think actually though, um, these citations are an MLA, so keep that in mind. This would be a year here. There would be, well, at least they would include a year as well. It'd be Smith, say whatever the year was, and then page 54, same thing with these two. But don't worry about the citations so much or the in-text citation so much as how they're using that source in different methods. That's what's important here. And then step 8, the easiest step, write the paper, right? Yes, it might seem like such a daunting task, but honestly, this is why we do Project 2. We find our sources, we read them, we figure out what's going on with our topic by reading the sources, and only then after we submit Project 2, the proposal, we then come up with a thesis, and then based on everything we read, we organize our thoughts in an outline, and then begin to write that paper. And it doesn't become such an overwhelming task if you give yourself plenty of time. And these steps have helped me when I had to write research papers in college and when I was um, doing this myself. So it's something that I would highly advise you guys to do if you have for this, especially. I mean, do whatever it is that you need to do to help you with this, but following these instructions helped me a lot, and I hope they help you too as well. Just want to go real quick over plagiarism, the Latin word for kidnapper. You think of it that way, they go into a little van and then they're kidnapping those words and then taking them without. That's basically, I mean, if you think of it that way, it's that's what plagiarism is. Basically, plagiarism is taking someone else's works, ideas, or words and use them as their own. Where the sentence, a part of a sentence, or an entire paper, it'll ruin your grade, right? It is an academic crime and an ethical offense. Plagiarism is stealing someone else's intellectual property. In most college classes, if you do that, you're given a zero for the course and you may be removed from the course completely, right? Um, why is it an academic crime? Is because you're stealing from another person's idea. It's illegal. It's immoral. You're not giving them credit or proper attribution, right? And one of the things to know is that I understand you're learning how to cite correctly. That's fine. I'm not worried about you um, citing something and it's incorrect. I know you weren't trying to steal their words or anything like that. You didn't do that. That's fine. That's why we have the revise. And I give you comments so that and I'll show you and I fix your citations for you. So you know that, or at least I give you, I tell you like this citation is incorrect. This is, do please make sure to fix it, something like that, because it's totally fine. This is just about making sure you don't take someone else's work and print it for your own. And along with that is now AI, right? AI use, which we do have to discuss now because it is an important thing. And like it or hate it, it is here. It is here to stay. It is going to be a big part. It's only going to get better. And I want to make sure we address it because it can be a tempting offer, right? It's a temptation to use AI to make something like this, to make your life well, at least you think you make your life easier. But here's the thing. AI is a tool, right? Like any other. It may enhance your writing and learning skills. It might help you in certain ways, but it should not take it should not overdo the work for you. Because the reason we have you write papers, the reason you come to school, the reason you're learning how to do this is because you need to learn these skills so you can succeed in your career at college, right? And eventually get off to your own whatever career you want to, right? Sure, AI will be useful for when you know the actual skill set yourself. So yeah, if I've made, so for instance, for myself, I've made many lesson plans and activities and things like that. But I'm like, you know what? I know how to do that. I know exactly how to do that. So sometimes I'll be like, you know what? AI, can you help me give me some ideas on how to make these lesson plans better? Great. I do that. I use that because I know how to do it myself though. If I had to, if somehow for some reason AI just doesn't work or it wasn't there, I could do it on my own. It would take me longer for sure, and I know it would because I've done it in the past, but I can do it. And this is what you need to learn about AI use. You need to learn the skill set yourself first before you can have ask it to do things that takes away that learning process from you. So AI do's, I have a couple things. Use it AI for brainstorming ideas. It's great for that. If you're having trouble of like thinking of a topic, just ask AI like, hey, what are some good topics? And then maybe give it some of your interests. Like I'm interested in video games and sports and things. What do you think is a good topic for writing a good research paper? That's great. Let's see what it comes up with. It can help with overcoming that writer's block that you may have, right? Use AI for proofreading, grammar checking. Now, this one, it depends if you're in a class in which grammar and proofreading is important and you're learning how to do that stuff. Don't use AI then. But in my class, that stuff should all be reviewed, right? You should all be pretty good on your grammar and punctuation. And if you're not, that's okay. You're still working on it. But if you want a second set of eyes, AI is great for proofreading grammar, and that's fine. Just be careful that it doesn't change your language, that it makes it sound robotic like an AI, not yourself. That can be tricky. So you have to be careful, okay? Don't use AI to write sentences for you just to fix your grammar and punctuation. Be very clear on that. It's also good with fact checking. Say you want to fact check something, use AI for that. Use AI to help structure your essay and documents, but write the content yourself. Again, structure is also good for AI to use, but the content should come from yourself. But if you need help with some structure, or maybe like connecting paragraph from one paragraph from this paragraph to the next paragraph, and you're having trouble connecting the two, or finding a sentence that sets up the next point, you can ask AI to kind of help you with that. Again, though, small parts of it. Don't have a big chunk that it writes. This is a good one for our paper. Use AI to generate a counter argument Ask it what it would be a good counter argument for whatever topic you are doing. So say it's again plastic bottles, and and I said, "Hey AI, I'm arguing that plastic bottles should be good, should be removed. What are some kind of arguments you think that people would say against it? See what it comes up with, because those are the good. There might be some good things that it would bring up that you didn't think about that you could use in your paper and be like, oh wow, that's good. Let's go and research some of these points. Um, Perfectly fine to do. AI don'ts. There's a lot of more AI don'ts. Don't make it or don't use it to generate content directly to without proper attribution. One of the things that it does is that it just gets sources, doesn't really attribute them, and then gives them to you, right? So like it just finds uh, this information, but doesn't actually give it credit for where the information came from, right? That would be plagiarism, right? So be careful. That's what it does a lot because a lot of the information it gathers is from the internet, it's from the web, it's from everything, all the information we have out there, but it gathers it without actually, and it presents it to you, and it might not actually give you where it came from. Avoid AI to write, and this should be obvious, but avoid AI to write entire essays, papers, or discussion posts for you. We us we teachers, we want to know what you have to say about it, what we about whatever we gave you, not a robot. We're not here to grade robots' work. And this is where a lot of the trouble comes from, right? Because of course it's easy. You could just ask it, hey, can you write a paper arguing why plastic bottles are bad? And then make sure it's 10 pages, and it'll do it. But it's not, it's you get nothing from that experience. And that's the thing. And you're like, well, I just want an easy out, right? And hey, that is something that is a very tempting offer. But again, that is not, you're not going to learn anything from it. You will not learn how to do this yourself. And if you end up at a university, it will bite you in the butt. Okay, we're getting really good at finding this kind of stuff. Don't do that. Don't use AI along with that to take quizzes or tests. Don't use AI. That's pretty obvious. Avoid AI to solve problems from assignments without understanding the process. And that's the idea. You're taking this class to understand the process of writing a research paper, no matter where you go. If you use AI to solve that, you're always going to be relying on this thing. You need to be able to do it yourself. And AI should just supplement that, not the other way around. Don't rely on AI to analyze data for you. Um, it depends, of course, on the data. So, for instance, if you're in a science class, you need to figure out how to analyze that data because it's part of the class. But in other instances, maybe the data is something you don't understand. You can use AI in that case, but be careful. It depends on what the class is about. Avoid using AI generated content without reviewing it for accuracy and potential biases. Again, sometimes the AI just takes things and says because you want to hear that, right? Instead of actually finding good sources, it just finds whatever and then presents it to you. Of course, this is always going to get better and it might be super good in 5 years, but for now, be careful. You got to make sure you can back up what it brings up. Don't use AI tools without permission of your professor or in violation of course policies. If your professor allows it, great. They'll probably tell you how to use it. If they don't, they don't. And that's that, right? But this is just some things to keep in mind. It's the world we live in now. It's why I ask you to use Google Docs because I want to know that your work is authentic. But having said that, I'm not saying that you shouldn't use it in certain instances. It is a useful tool. I use it in certain parts for some stuff in my life. It's great to check even me for I always like to double check my grammar and punctuation, and I use that for all the time. But again, when it comes to learning how to do a research paper, you're not going to get that if you ask it to write it for you. So, in service to all this, you of course will be writing a research paper. However, I want you to kind of get a little let me share my screen over here real quick to finish this. I want you to get a little use of AI. So, like how to use it for good, for the good of mankind, or for the good of your learning, right? So here I have a little activity for you guys. Please, it's 100 discussions for this week. Make sure to go through it. All the instructions are here, but basically, I want you to use Chat PDF and to upload one of your journal articles that you should have got from doing this second assignment, and then go from there. And then after you're done and you kind of messed around with Chat PDF, I want you to answer these questions. You don't have to answer all of them, by the way. Just whichever ones kind of speak to you. to just to help you write your 300 word response and then post it here. It's not a discussion. It's just a post about this here. I do want you to use Google Docs though to write your draft your assignment and then just copy and paste the stuff over or actually sorry, download as a Word file, upload it as a Word file, and then copy and paste your link just like you've always done. And that should be good for teaching you how to use AI in a good way to help you. And this hopefully helps you for those really tough parts in the journal articles that you've had where you're like, I'm not sure how to use this data set. And that's what I'm talking about, where they have these great graphs and stuff, but you're like, I have no idea what it's talking about, which is understandable. Those sources aren't written for you, they're written for other people in that field. But it might be good information to use in your paper. How do you how do you navigate that? This might be a great tool, and I want you to keep this in mind. Now, one thing to note is that Chat PDF only allows you 2 free PDFs per day. So make sure you use the PDFs that you want to look at because then you'll have to come over the next day. You only need to do one, but it might be good to just kind of mess around with it. So use another one. And you might want to use it further along when you start writing your research paper, right? So, but just keep that in mind. You can only use 2 per day and that's it. It's like a little free little trial there. Otherwise, you'll have to have a subscription to it. Hopefully it works fine still because it's a great resource. And oh man, I wish it was a little bit more, a little bit I wish it was free in some ways, or at least give student access to it, would be so awesome. Maybe in the future, that'd be one of your fees as you cover something like this. But for now, we work with what we got. Anyways, this has been a long enough lecture. I hope you got a lot of it from finding out how to do a research paper, how to find sources, how to use AI properly, how to write a paper. This will be a good way to start thinking about how to write your own paper for when we start project 3. You're not quite there yet, but you definitely should be thinking about it. Otherwise, that is it for this video. I will see you on the next one. Goodbye.